Hi, it's Mimi Chen for AsAmNews. You remember the Slants. They went to the Supreme Court and argued successfully for the right to use their name, even though considered a pejorative. Recently, they just announced an end to touring, but have in mind a bunch of new projects. Among them, a project which will help young Asian American artists. Simon Tan of the band caught up with us recently, and he talked about all those projects, including a new book.
I've been touring on my new memoir, which is Slanted: How an Asian American Troublemaker Took on the Supreme Court. So basically, kind of the story of the slants and all the work we had been doing, as well as kind of that journey and fighting for the rights for our name.
How does it feel to be in the history books now?
I'm still alive, so I don't quite know yet. I think that for what we were able to do with our case, I mean, I feel very, very humbled to be part of a much bigger story, a story of civil rights, a story of reappropriation, and certainly with the work of our band, a part of that story in trying to get the visibility of Asian Americans in entertainment lifted up. I mean, when I started, this is like pre-YouTube days, there really wasn't anyone out there, and especially there wasn't anyone playing like rock music. There was a couple of hip hop artists and things like that, but to be able to kind of be a part of those early days of that movement, I mean, my goodness, it was quite a struggle, but at the same time, really rewarding too.
Yeah, I can say that being in the music industry myself, but more in the radio field, that I have noticed the artists who come out seem to be mainly from Asia. So what are your thoughts about, the difference between the Asian artists from Asia versus Asian American?
I think that the artists from Asia are experiencing a different level of success because they actually have the backing of the industry there. The countries are eager to export their work, and oftentimes they have a lot of resources and access to things that we don't get here. As Asian Americans, we have an inherently different experience that we have an industry that will look at us and assume we're one of those acts from Asia, that and assume that we're just kind of thrown into that bucket without even considering the fact that we could just be Americans just like everyone else. And that presents a lot of interesting things. Like, I mean, for many years when I was booking shows for the Slants, different promoters would reach out to me and say like, hey, we have this band from Japan that's coming into town. Do you want to play? And I'm like, yeah, I don't mind playing with bands, but at the same time, I'm always thinking like, well, what kind of music do they play? Does it make sense for us? And we would be put together on bills with hip hop artists or heavy metal or K-pop. And I'm like, look, we're kind of a dance rock band, and it's not always the best fit. Why don't you ask another metal band or another hip hop artist? But they're just like, oh, well, they're Asian. You're some kind of Asian. Maybe this will work.
Do you find that is happening still?
Not as much these days. No, I think that I think people have this little bit of an understanding that like we're not a K-pop band. So at least that has been understood. As far as like the different rock bands from Japan, sometimes they're a good fit. So I'm always excited when that happens, and gladly take those opportunities. But I think we've been able to at least establish ourselves in a different community where promoters who know us know that we're not just a band from Asia, that we have a very distinct following and a distinct type of music. So to be able to carve that path has been great, but it took over 10 years before that started happening.
So how has things changed for you for the past 10 years?
Well, I mean, I've been able to see the industry change. Nowadays, we get to see more Asian faces in mainstream entertainment. That wasn't even imaginable when I started this group. But now the fact we got Crazy Rich Asians, Always Be My Maybe, Fresh Off the Boat, we got all this like content that's starting to appear in Hollywood and on television. That is slowly changing the game. So that part is very, very exciting. I think for me, I mean, our band was unique in the fact that we had to struggle with this legal battle that took almost 8 years of my life. So that certainly was a bit of a distraction. It also put us in the news a lot, not for our music, but for like a law case, which kind of has certain challenges in of itself. But now that it's been 2 years since that case was resolved, it's been really nice that I could kind of focus on more creative endeavors. So things like writing my memoir, and right now we're also composing music for a musical that's going to be based on my life and the kind of journey of our band. So I don't know if those opportunities would have been available, like, or even things I would have even thought would be happening a decade ago. But it's exciting to see these kinds of things happening.
Has the Slants seen a greater increase in interest in your music as opposed to the legal side?
Um, I think a lot of people found us through the legal battle. I think it's kind of like a positive and a negative. Like positive, great. I'm always happy when people come to know our work, no matter like the channel that they find us in, whether it's us playing at an anime convention, a rock club, on a military base, or even these days I do a lot of law schools and kind of law related events. Like that's always exciting. But I wish that those who just heard about us would take it a step further. So I mean, I could say that it's happened to me thousands of times where someone will find out I'm in the Slants, and then they'll say, "Oh, I've heard of your band," and then they'll immediately follow it up with, "But I haven't heard your music. What do you sound like? What do you?" I'm like, "Look, it's on YouTube, it's on Spotify. It's not that difficult. If you heard about the story and you really thought it was groundbreaking and intriguing, and the idea of the band was that exciting to you, why didn't you just take it an extra step?" But so there's always that. But however, I'm glad that they know about our work, and I'm always grateful for that.
Do you find yourself headlining more? Is this the impact of the case? Is that happened for your band in terms of getting more slots or getting more, touring opportunities?
I think it kind of depends on the show itself. I mean, we've been headlining shows since like year two, because I mean, when we first started the band, before there was this big blow up in terms of news on like our trademark case, we were already getting radio play on like 800 stations, and NPR did this huge story on us talking about the band that was turning stereotypes upside down. So like we already had a lot of like industry momentum, and we were playing clubs pretty frequently. Um, but like anything else, like sometimes we would get a great headlining slot, like we headlined a showcase at South by Southwest in 2009, and sometimes not. So like this year at South by Southwest, we did not headline one. We played in the convention center while I was also delivering remarks about our case. So things kind of change over time, but that's just how it is. Like I don't really care about what slot we play in as long as we get a chance to share our art with people.
So you mentioned that you're working on a musical. What other projects in terms of the Slants do you have envisioned?
Well, one of the things that we did this year is we actually announced that in November we are retiring the band. Like we're not going to be,
Wow.
yeah, we're not going to be doing live um, rock and roll shows anymore as a full band. We're not going to tour as a band. I think that we're kind of tired. I mean, I've been doing this for 13 years, and like the travel has been exhausting. I loved it, but I think I'm ready for something else. That being said, we are working on a new album, and that we're probably going to release next year. And what it's going to do is feature a collaboration with Asian American artists from around the country. So, in other words, we're going to use our platform to raise the visibility of other artists, and kind of bring about this like up and coming scene of different talent. On top of that, we also just launched a nonprofit organization. So we're raising money to provide scholarships for artists to do work, especially artists that are incorporating community activism into their work, or what I call like future troublemakers. So we want to be that mentor. We want to be that repository of funding and opportunities for up and coming Asian American musicians. So those are the things I'm really, really excited about. And of course, like I love Broadway. I'm a huge musical theater geek. So the fact that I get to participate in something like that, it's very, very cool.
That is incredible. So that's your goal for the musical, is a Broadway show, or is it actually in the works?
Yeah, it's in the works right now. We're in fact having a writing retreat with the writer and director this August, and we're going to be kind of spending some time revamping the script and coming up with new songs. So I'm not actually writing the thing, and
Hmm.
I'm glad for that because I am not. That's not one of my talents, is writing theater. But we do have someone who's involved, and he's directed Phantom of the Opera, Rent, Les Miserables, so some pretty big deal musicals, and has also been a performer on Broadway himself. So that person is kind of handling the writing and direction of things, whereas me and my guitarist Joe, we're kind of handling composing music, which is great because that's kind of what we love doing anyway.
Right. Um, are there any other projects like movies or more YouTube oriented projects?
Oh, well, I mean, I've been in talks with a couple of different people about a possible movie. Um, Joe, our guitarist, has been working on a documentary about the band. And I think originally it started out as kind of a documentary about the court case, but he's looking to expand it. And so I think, I'm not doing anything with that. That's its own separate project. But so there's a couple of things that are in development. Um, and we'll just kind of see what happens. And in the meantime, I've mostly been on the road. I have another 90 appearances this year,
Wow.
all kind of wrapped around speaking, storytelling, playing music. We're doing a 2-night off-Broadway show in November in New York City. That's going to be that combination of storytelling and music. So it's not going to be the actual Broadway musical that we're working on, but it's going to be something more like Springsteen on Broadway, where I'm going to tell stories. We're going to
Uh-huh.
roll in some songs and make it like a really kind of intimate kind of experience.
And you said you're going to tour till November. That's when your last show is going to be?
Yeah, the last show as a band's going to be November 2nd in Seattle, Washington. I'll still be doing a few events after that, and kind of doing some events with my guitarist or other people. But as far as that full band kind of thing, um, I think we're ready to move on to kind of the next chapter of the band.
The word has to be out now. This is your last tour.
Yeah, it's bittersweet. I mean, it's certainly been such an honor to perform for so many years and to meet so many people across this country. So I've always been very, very grateful for that. But it's like I think it's time for us to kind of use all of the goodwill that we've developed and now help empower a new generation of artists.
Now, we see this landmark Supreme Court case as a win for Asian Americans wanting to own their own identity, but I have heard some other viewpoints, such as what happened with the Redskins. What is your perspective on that?
Sure, and I think that there's a lot of misconceptions about how trademark law works, and so those ideas actually kind of confound the discussion. So, for example, with the Washington football team, a lot of people worried that if we had won, which we did, that it would empower Dan Snyder to keep the name of the football team. But the reality is that the name of the team was never in danger. The only thing that was in question was the trademark registration, that document that says this is a registered trademark. In fact, the team wouldn't have even lost their trademark rights at all. So if the aim is to try and make sure that people aren't using hateful terms, the trademark office isn't necessarily the place to do that kind of work. What we found instead, what was happening with the law, was that people like me were being denied registrations or denied certain benefits because of their race. So when we asked the trademark office, hey, if slant is this inherent racial slur, like how come you gave it to 800 other people? The trademark office said that we were too Asian to use it. That, if people see the words the slants and they see our faces, they're going to automatically think racial slur instead of any other possible definition, thus basically denying us a right based on a race, saying like anyone can register as long as they're not Asian. And we actually found out that to be the case with every single racial slur in the dictionary. Like everything you could think of for an Asian American was registered, but whenever an Asian applied, they were denied. And the same thing goes for terms that feminists and members of the LGBTQ community tend to reappropriate. Whenever it was those members, the government said, no, 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 reappropriation is not acceptable. But whenever it was like a dominant group, they just gave them the benefit of the doubt. So when I saw this kind of really inequitable balance of law, I realized we do need to challenge this, and that as tough as it is to like wrestle with this idea that sometimes people who maybe are opportunistic or people who take advantage of the law will be using it for negative things, we have to realize that justice isn't just about punishing people who do those things.
Are there any words that you have for, Asian Americans who are attempting to get into the music industry?
A lot. In fact, I run a daily podcast show specifically to help people who want to get into the music industry called Music Business Hacks. But I think more than anything, when I start thinking about the kind of change that I would like to see in the world, and whether someone wants to become a musician or whether they want to become an attorney, I oftentimes tell them the same thing, that if you want to create change in the world, don't just follow your passion. Because what you're passionate about can be kind of this whim. It could be this dream. You think like, oh, I'm passionate about music, and therefore I want to do this, and maybe some good will happen. I always advocate follow your values. Figure out what that inner drive is. What do you care most deeply about in the world? And then figure out how to follow those and incorporate those into whatever you do. So if you really care about being creative, if you care about a more just world, well, you don't have to be a musician to do that. You could do that as a graphic designer. You could do that as a waiter. You can do that as a parent. Like, figure out those inner values that you care deeply about and find ways to express them no matter where you are and what position you hold. And that's how you find true success and true happiness.
If you refer to the written part of this article, you'll see the link to Simon Tan's podcast, as well as how you can get involved if you're a young Asian American musical artist. For ASAM News, I'm Mimi Chen.